Morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity North Tampa. By the way, I've already been asked 10 times, so I don't have to be asked another 10 times. I shaved my head because I'm doing a chemotherapy. I lived on an island for 17 years and spent a lot of time at the beach, so now I'm being the place for it. Wear sunscreen and hats. And you can sing with us if you'd like. You want to sing?
Yes.
Ready? I'm not worried about tomorrow. Today I declare freedom from yesterday, mistakes of the past. Today all things are made brand new. And don't it feel good to know that all is well and unfolding as it should? I can change my reality by changing my mind. Perfect peace, joy, and happiness is yours and is mine. I am loved and so are you. And don't it feel good to know that all is well and unfolding as it should? Sing it with us. All is well, all is well. Divine Spirit is directing me right now. Right now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please join me in prayer. We take a moment and we center in the here and the now. We are grateful for this spiritual community, and we affirm that each person here and watching online will be blessed by this service. We affirm guidance and clarity as we go forth as a spiritual family, knowing that all is well and unfolding as it should. And so it is. Amen.
Welcome to Unity. My name is Penny Phillips. We recognize each one of you as being wise and loving, powerful spiritual beings. Thank you for sharing your radiant presence with us this morning. Just a quick reminder to please silence your cell phones. We are delighted to have our own Greg Yarmesch with us as our guest speaker today. Greg has been a student of Unity for 15 years and shares the Unity principles by facilitating classes, giving Sunday talks, and weekly inspirational emails. As president of a building materials distribution company, he brings the Unity message into the business world. With coaching, mentoring, leadership retreats, and personal demonstration, Greg teaches his employees how to live their best lives, both personally and professionally. Thank you, Greg, for sharing your inspiration with us today. And we are pleased that you have chosen to be with us today, either in person or online. If this is your first time being with us in person, please raise your hand. An usher will bring you a welcome packet and flowers. And we want you to know that in the welcome packet, there is a discount card for 10% off any purchase in our bookstore. So you may want to stop at our bookstore after the service today to see what's available. Please join me as we together our opening affirmation, which is in your bulletin and on the screen. There is only one presence and one power in my life and in the universe, God, the good omnipotence. Bill Leach, our Leadership Council co-treasurer, is going to share his Unity story with us today.
So this is supposed to be my story about how I found Unity, but it's really the story about how Unity found me. I grew up in a small town, Arcadia, about 100 miles southeast of here. And growing up, I went to Sunday school at various churches around town. And that didn't really become a problem until I got to the age where my youth minister told me that I was going to have to make a choice. And according to him, the choice was that I could either be gay or I could be Christian, but I could not be both. And I thought it was kind of unfair that God was going to punish me for all eternity for being the person that I knew myself to be. And so I decided that God must be my enemy, and I didn't want anything else to do with God. And even though I turned my back on God at that point, God did not abandon me, because very shortly after that, I turned 16, which meant I was now old enough to go to work. And I got a job working for the local radio station. And this was a small AM station. We only broadcast during daylight hours. We would go on the air at 6 a.m. and sign off every evening at 5:30. And so I would work during the week after school for a couple of hours, but then on the weekend, to give the professional DJs the weekend off, I worked all day, sunrise to sunset, Saturday and Sunday. And now I was being paid the princely sum of $1.60 an hour to no longer have to go to church. There were a couple of downsides to this. The first one was that I had to start getting up a lot earlier than what I'd been accustomed to on the weekend. And the other was that there was a lot of religious programming on this station, particularly on the weekend. And because I had been convinced that God was my enemy, I tried to ignore it as best as I could, with one exception. There was this one 90-second segment that would come up. It was on a loop with other announcements and messages. It would come up 2 or 3 times a week as I was working there. And the message changed every week, but it always started the same way. This is the word from Unity. Now, at that time, I did not know that that would have been a selection from the Daily Word that had been adapted to radio. All I knew was that this didn't sound like any of the other messaging that I was hearing at that time in my life. Because when I listened to the word from Unity, they didn't talk a whole lot about sin or hell. They seemed to be more interested in what was right with people rather than what was wrong with them. And the things that they did talk about were things that I believed in, things like peace and love. And so it planted a seed. That seed was going to lay dormant for a while because I did not have a spiritual community or support system of any sort. And because of that, and because I didn't really feel like I fit in anywhere, didn't really belong any place, I ended up hanging out with the only crowd that would have me. And that was the kids who drank and got high. And this became a problem because over the next 14 years, as I was to learn slowly and painfully, I am an addict and an alcoholic. And I cannot drink or drug safely because once I start, there is no predicting when I will stop. And as time went on, the consequences of my drinking and drugging got worse and worse. By 1986, I was pretty much a king of my rope. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't know what else I could do, but I knew I couldn't keep going the way I was going. Once again, the universe came to my rescue because I ended up being compelled to take part in a recovery program for alcoholics. And I didn't like it in the beginning because one of the first things that happened, this fellow who wanted to help me brought out this book and says, well, this is how this program works. He didn't get very far because this is a spiritual program that we're talking about. And when he got to the word G-O-D, God, I said, you can close your book and go home because that's not going to work for me. But the thing is, I had to keep going to the darn meetings. And, I noticed that the other people who had the same issues that I did were having a good time not drinking and drugging, and I was not drinking and drugging, I was abstinent, but I was miserable. So I finally said, well, I'm going to have to read that darn book and see if there's something in there that might help. As it turns out, very early on in that book, the man who's writing the book had exactly the same experience that I did. A friend of his had come to talk to him about his drinking problem and to offer a spiritual solution. And the man writing the book says, oh no, not God, anything but that, pour me another drink. And the man who came to help him said something rather extraordinary. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Well, no one had ever suggested to me that that was even a possibility. And so I got to wondering, what would it be like if there actually was a God who accepts me exactly the way I am? What if instead of a God who wants me to burn, there's a God who wants me to be happy? And so, slowly but surely, bit by bit, I came to believe that there might be some kind of power somewhere in the universe that actually cared about me and wanted me to live. And so I became a little more willing to occasionally follow suggestions after that. And it was suggested to me that I should start looking for a spiritual community outside of my recovery program to supplement what I was doing inside of my recovery program. And that's when that seed that was planted back in 1972 sprouted, because I was in Tampa by that time, and I discovered that there was a Tampa Unity. And so I went there one Sunday, and I had exactly the same experience that everyone who stood up here telling their stories had. I felt like I'd come home, like I had finally found a place where I did fit, I did belong, that I had found what I didn't even know I'd been looking for. The minister at Tampa Unity at that time was Ross Goodman, and every Sunday he would start his lesson sermon by reading a passage from the Bible. When he did that, though, he would do something rather extraordinary. He would read the passage from the Bible, and then he would pause, and he would look up, and he would ask, now what does this mean to me today? And that's when I got the idea, like, hey, he's doing the same thing I'm doing in my recovery program. He's going to his own inner guidance, his own inner truth, to understand what's in Scripture for him. And if he can do that, so can I. And so at that point, I was hooked in a good way this time, and I kept coming back. So over time, I began to understand that everybody was on their own spiritual path, and we all are doing the best we can with what we've got at that particular moment, wherever we are. And it was in that consciousness that one Sunday I decided to go down and visit my father in Arcadia. And it was Sunday, it was Father's Day. He says, well, do you want to go to church with me? And to his surprise, I said, sure, let's go. And yes, I absolutely heard a lot of things in the message that day that were not my truth. But I also realized it's not my truth, but it's Dad's. This is what he believes. This is what fits his experience. This is his truth. And just as I would not want to be judged for my beliefs, I have no business judging him for his. Judge not, lest ye be judged. And so, on the way back to the house, Dad looks over at me and he says, well, what did you think of the sermon? Fully expecting me to present him with my list of grievances, because that's the person I used to be. But instead, I did something different. I chose to focus on what we shared, what we had in common, rather than what appeared to separate us. And so I said, well, I really like the part of the message where he talked about honoring and respecting your father. That's important to me. And in my relationship with my father, that's the closest I ever came to telling him that I cared about him. But for my experience in Unity and my other spiritual practices, that conversation would have never taken place. And so that Sunday, I made peace with my father. I made peace with the God of my father. And it was a few weeks after that Dad died in an automobile accident. What I'm going to fast forward now to 2017. I'm at Tampa Unity. The music director is performing a song that he had written, and there's a particular lyric that keeps catching my attention because he's singing the words, "Amazing Grace." Now, this is not the hymn, Amazing Grace. This was a song he had written with those words in it. But it reminded me of Dad because that was his favorite hymn. It had been sung at his funeral, so he would have wanted. And so I'm sitting there thinking about Dad, and then I'm reflecting on the fact that, you know, I've been coming around Unity for about 30 years now, and I don't think I've ever even heard the words Amazing Grace during a Unity service. Now, it's possible that I wasn't there that Sunday or that I wasn't paying attention. But to the best of my knowledge, that February in 2017 was the very first time I ever heard the words Amazing Grace in a Unity service. And then I glanced down at the date of the bulletin. So much time had passed that I had lost track, but that Sunday would have been my father's 85th birthday. And I like to think of it as that Dad chose to go to church with me that day, to remind me of what we shared, what we had in common, rather than what appeared to separate us. So, 30 years is a long time. Things change, people change, I had changed. And so I started looking around for another spiritual home. And I found out that there was another Unity in Tampa that was actually right up the road from the house and closer than the one I'd been going to. And I thought, well, I'll go check that out. So I drive up Florida Avenue, and I go into the parking lot of this dingy little strip mall. As I'm about to explain to you, this was not a problem. So I go in, it's very comfortable, it's very reassuring. It's all positive. There's an affirmation that is being used. It was the one that I had heard in Unity when I first came in, and hadn't heard for years. The one we just did, there only one presence and one power. And so I'm thinking, well, this might work. This could be it. I wasn't really getting that, 2x4 upside the head kind of sensation yet. Because after the service, I go over to the fellowship suite, and it was nice, really. And I noticed a little bookstore back in the corner, and so I wander over there, and I look up on the wall, and I see that there's a bunch of flyers up there. And there's one flyer in particular that catches my attention. It's in your bulletin today, as a matter of fact, and thank you, ladies, for bringing this one back. It says LGBT resources. For those of you who are not in the know, the G stands for gay. And then I take one of the flyers down, and that's when I get the Cosmic 2x4, because I see this. Rainbow Recovery Club, LGBT 12-step recovery, Tampa, Florida. Since our inception in 1991, we have served thousands of LGBT community members in a wide range of 12-step recovery groups by providing them with a safe, comfortable, and supportive place for them to hold meetings. I wrote those words. I'd written them years ago for our website. I'm a founding member of that organization. And so that was about the time I started to get the idea that maybe there was like some kind of plan or design. Maybe I'm supposed to be at Unity North Tampa, you think? And this is the part where I need to tell you that for many years, the Rainbow Recovery Club also held its meetings in a dingy little strip mall in South Tampa. And so I thought, well, okay, here I am, home again. And it did turn out to be home. As I got to know all of you better, I came to believe that, yes, I was not just accepted here, but welcomed. And I want you all to know how much that means to me and how much I appreciate it. So the point of my story, if there is one, is that there are no accidents in God's universe. That everything has a reason and a purpose. That the truth is always there. The truth may come to me as a voice on the radio. The truth may come to me as I'm reading words in a book or on a piece of paper that suddenly shift my awareness. The truth may come to me as the lyrics in a song. But the messages are always there. It's simply a question of whether or not I'm paying attention. And I'd like to close with this. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Thank you.
Amen.
Don't go far, Bill. I love these Unity stories. I absolutely love these Unity stories, and personal stories are some of the most powerful tools, most powerful gifts that we have on this planet. Personal stories, they really are. I just had to add that. Thank you, Bill. The Daily Word has daily devotions that inspire people around the world. As we affirm today's message, we become global prayer partners. I'm sorry, I'm still shaking up from this story. We become global prayer partners with others, sharing the same positive intentions for the good of all. We ask that you center within now and listen deeply as we share today's message. Bill Leach will share the Daily Word in English, and David Lopez will share the message in Spanish.
I just keep coming back. This is the word from Unity. Let go, let God. I do what is mine to do and release the rest. I am equipped with powerful spiritual tools to use toward creating the life of my dreams. Through prayer and meditation, visualization and affirmation, I am willing to work for what I want to see manifested in my life and in the lives of those I care about. Sometimes I can be so focused on what I'm doing that I forget the importance of stepping back from my efforts and releasing my attachment to specific outcomes. There is great peace that comes from knowing that I have done all I can do, and then, in perfect peace and clarity, releasing outcomes to the divine that is in all people and circumstances. I heed my guidance to discern when to take action and when to yield to the activity of spirit. And from Matthew 6:33, but strive first for the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Domingo 27 de junio del 2021. La palabra de hoy es dejar ir. Hago lo que me corresponde y libro a los demás. Cuento con herramientas espirituales poderosas. Las utilizo para crear la vida de mis sueños. Mediante la oración y la meditación, la visualización y la afirmación, dispongo a planear y trabajar para disfrutar de lo que quiero que se manifieste en mi vida y en las vidas de mis seres queridos. También recuerdo la importancia de dar un paso atrás para evaluar mi progreso y dejar ir el apego y resultados específicos. Siento gran paz cuando sé que he hecho todo lo posible con claridad y aplomo. Delego los resultados a la divinidad presente en todas las personas y las circunstancias. Presto atención a mi guía para decidir cuándo actuar y cuándo entregarme a la actividad del Espíritu. Y de Mateo 6:33 la palabra dice, por lo tanto, busquen primeramente el reino de Dios y su justicia, y todas estas cosas serán añadidas. Y así será.
Now let's listen to I Am a Gift in preparation for meditation with prayer chaplain Robert Anderson.
I am a gift, no matter what age, no matter how I look, there's beauty in each stage. I am a gift, and I promise every day, when I look in the mirror, I'll say, I am a gift. I am a gift. I've loved out really well, and every year I've lived has a different tale to tell. I've made mistakes, have some regrets, but I promise I'll never forget. I am a gift. There may be times when I forget the truth about me, when it seems time and youth are just marching on without me. That's when I might need you to find me, and ever so gently remind me that I am a gift, a precious child, and put here on this earth, but only for a while. So I make this vow, and I say it with love. I am perfect and whole and enough. I am a gift. I am a gift. I am a gift. I am a gift.
Please join me in this time of meditation. We begin by finding a comfortable position in the chair, sitting with the spine straight, to allow for the flow of breath and the flow of energy, sitting in alert attention to our oneness with spirit within. Close your outer eyes if that's comfortable for you. Closing the outer eyes, we bring our attention inward into our heart space. We set aside any concerns to relax the mind and body. Allow a feeling of peace and serenity to flow over you now, from the top of your head all the way down through and around the body. Relax even more now by breathing deeply into the belly and the chest, allowing the belly to expand as you inhale fully. Then exhale fully with a sigh to calm the mind and body. Take 2 more deep breaths in this way at your own pace. Breathe deeply into the belly and exhale with a sigh 2 more times. We allow the breath to find a natural rhythm, observing the movement of the body as we breathe. And with your attention in your heart center, allow these words to become your thoughts as we listen to the Christ voice within. I am the divine power able to easily and gracefully let go of false beliefs and ego-centered thoughts that do not serve me. I renounce any beliefs that are not in keeping with my truth as a wise and loving spiritual being. I release anxiety, doubt, and irritation that I may fully experience peace and freedom. I know I am always loved and provided for by the Creator. The universe is conspiring for my happiness. As we take a few moments in stillness, I invite you to choose a troubling situation, a fearful thought or judgmental attitude to release now. In your heart, you know what you are ready to release. In the sacred union with your higher self, silently declare, I now release this to spirit within. In the silence. Take another deep breath, bringing your attention back to the room, noticing how you are feeling. If you experienced any resistance from the ego mind, declare firmly, I release and let go of fear and judgment, of all that is false, and let God within me express as the light and love that I am. Nothing can disturb the perfect peace of God within me. I am the peace of God. Centered in that peace of God within, we now call to mind those we would like to include in prayer now. As these names come to mind, do not see them as victims of any circumstance. Think of them as they truly are, whole and well in spirit, radiant, strong, peaceful, happy, and abundant. As you speak their names either silently or out loud, see them as the magnificent expression of God that they are, unfolding in divine order, in the right way, at the right time. Please take a moment now to speak the name silently or softly. As we pray for our loved ones, we also affirm wholeness and well-being for all those in our prayer box. We pray for all people everywhere, for we are all brothers and sisters in spirit. And so it is. Please join me now in affirming, as Jesus taught us to pray, our Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from error. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
I am a gift, no matter what age, no matter how I look, there's beauty in each stage. I am a gift, and I promise every day, when I look in the mirror, I'll say, I am a gift. I am a gift, I've loved really well, and every year I've lived has a different tale to tell. I've made mistakes, have some regrets, but I promise I'll never forget. I am a gift. There may be times when I forget the truth about me, when it seems time and you are just marching on without me. That's when I might need you to find me, and ever so gently remind me that I am a gift, a precious child, put here on this earth, and only for a while. So I make this vow, and I say it with love. I am perfect and whole and enough. I am a gift. I am a gift. I am a gift. I am a gift.
It's a pleasure to be back again today to share a little bit of wisdom and insight that I've picked up along the way. And Bill, your message this morning was just fabulous. It's a tough act to follow. You know, I think Bill and I maybe have ran in the same circles when we were in high school, because I was just thinking that my old high school buddies, if they knew I was speaking on stage in a church, they would certainly have guessed that hell had frozen over. I think Bill's friends might have said the same, you know. Such a privilege. So, you know, today I have the opportunity to share with you some things that I've learned from a teacher that right in Virginia shared quite a bit of his work with, this Dr. David Hawkins. Dr. Hawkins is well known for his first book, which was called Power versus Force, and in that he presented this map of consciousness, which is just a little background on Dr. Hawkins. Not only was he a medical doctor, but he was also a scientist that studied human consciousness. And he was a mystic and an amazing, beloved spiritual teacher. In fact, I had the privilege to see him in person before he passed. And you know, every once in a while, I think we're all blessed with the opportunity to come across a human being that defies all logic. You know, somebody that when you're in their presence, they emit and radiate a degree of love that is incomprehensible. And I think we got a piece of that this morning with Bill. And it's such a joy to be able to have this opportunity of life to you know, to think back of, Bill, you know, I wasn't even planning on using you as a topic, but if you don't mind. My story is a lot like Bill's, and what's interesting is that, you know, there was a time earlier in my life where I had, you know, God was absolutely an opponent. You know, God was out to get me and was out to destroy me. And my mindset around God and any kind of spiritual teaching or religious teaching was very convoluted. So, you know, it's amazing that in time, you know, we learn that God doesn't abandon us even though we turn our back on God. And it's kind of like the GPS, you know. We set a course for you know, a destination, and no matter how far off track we get from that original course, you know, that GPS brings us back right on track to our ultimate destination. And so that's definitely an experience that I had. And Dr. Hawkins has given us, humanity, a tool to use to best understand what's going on inside of our inner state of being and how we can understand better these thoughts and these belief systems that no longer serve us. You know, Robert's meditation today was just so apropos for my talk, because it's really about letting go of those thoughts and those beliefs that no longer serve our highest good for ourselves and also for humanity. So the map of consciousness that we're going to talk about today is a scale of basically our inner state of being. And I think that each one of us in this room will identify with most of the levels of consciousness on there. And it starts off at, you know, the lowest level of consciousness in the human realm, which I would say that, you know, really coma is probably the lowest level, because when you're in a coma, you're not aware. You're alive, but you're not aware. Sleep is just a little bit right above that, but then we move into the first level that Dr. Hawkins talks about. So if I can have the next slide, please, Lennon. Thank you. So today we're going to start at the bottom. And you can kind of imagine that we talk a lot in Unity about peeling the onion layer back, right? We use that analogy a lot. And so each of these 17 levels that are described here are like layers of the onion that we peel back. They're layers of misunderstanding. They're layers of confusion and doubt and fear that as we begin to understand more clearly what's going on within us, and we can release those things and move up into higher states. So look at this as there's nothing good or bad about this. Don't look at this and say, you know, gosh, I'm here and that's bad. You know, I ought to be up here. This is a tool to just, for us to assist us in seeing where we're at. It also is a wonderful tool to assist us in seeing where other people are at. And when we understand where people are at, it's more advantageous for us to be able to respond to them in an effective way. So the next slide, please, Lynn. I'm going to break this out now. In Dr. Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, he makes a clear distinction that there is a line, if you will, and that line is basically a distinction between everything. The levels of consciousness below the line are like forced consciousness. They're very ego-based thoughts, and you can see in the bottom there feelings or thoughts like shame and guilt and apathy, grief and fear. I mean, I think all of these are levels of consciousness that, well, I'll just say that I know that I've experienced. You know, maybe you haven't, but I think a lot of us in Unity, our stories started off somewhere down at the bottom, you know. And so in this realm here, the prevailing consciousness is based on falsehood. The inner thought, the inner dialogue is very deceptive. Our thoughts and behavior are very destructive. These things kind of tend to prey on life, and we ultimately very much position ourselves as the victim or the martyr in life. Now, I learned something a while ago that said that in order to be considered an expert, that you needed to spend at least 10,000 hours doing something. And I want to promise you and tell you that the good news is that I'm an expert at the lower levels of consciousness here. I've done a fabulous job navigating them. I know them very well, and at the time when I was going through it, I didn't really quite understand it, but the great news is that, like even into the story, we have these experiences that allow us to really analyze, what's going on inside of us and how we're able to release those things and move on to another level. And I think that goes back to the idea of the great GPS. No matter how far off track we get, God continues to bring us back to our journey. So as we move from the lower levels up into the higher levels, that there's a designing level here, and it's at the level 200. And you can see that Dr. Hawkins has calibrated each of these levels of consciousness. Now, he writes about the details behind the calibration. We certainly don't have enough time to talk about that today, but basically what it does is he assigns a level of power to each level of consciousness, and that power is relative to the ones around him. And it is a logarithmic scale, so as you grow in consciousness, the power that you have continues to grow as well. But at the top here, when you're above the level of 200, which is courage, these levels of consciousness are rooted in truth. There is a prevailing feel of integrity. We are very creative. Our behavior is very life-supporting, healing, and we do take responsibility. So as opposed to being the victim of circumstance, we look at what happens and we say, what can I do about it? How can I take charge of what's going on, or what can I, how do I make lemons in the lemonade? Kind of the attitude there. So I'm going to move now into, I know that this is a little difficult to see, so we're going to go into the next slide, which will go down at the bottom here, and I just would like to touch, being that we're limited on time, I'm going to just kind of touch into each of these levels. And the bottom is shame, as I mentioned. So the way that I was raised, and this was no fault of my parents, they were just doing the very best they could with what light they had, but our religious upbringing really surrounded the notion of shame and guilt. As a matter of fact, if I had $1 for all the times I was told that I was a bad boy and God was going to punish me and shame on you, I'd be a millionaire, Again, I don't say that in anything but reverence and understanding that that's the way that my caretakers were taught by their caretakers. And so, it just perpetuated, the illusion that we were separate and unlovable. So the idea of humiliation, as you can see, is the associated, emotional state that goes along with that. Guilt was a place that I spent a lot of time in. So, we have one of 5 siblings, and we were constantly blaming each other for the stuff that we did because we obviously didn't want to get punished. So it was always somebody else. Now, I'm the youngest of 5, so I was the one that ultimately got blamed for everything. So, apathy is this state of despair. And for any of you who've been in that place where you just feel really stuck, maybe you're struggling with an addiction or a codependent behavior, or you're in a place of just, you feel like you're just spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. It's very easy to fall into this state of apathy. And, ultimately you feel very hopeless. You feel in despair. And it's, I'd like to say that some of these lower levels, my experience of them are like hell on earth. That was my experience of them. As you move up into higher levels of the low levels is grief. We all experience grief, especially when we lose a loved one, or something valuable to us, a job, a companion. Those are it's a very natural thing that happens in human consciousness. The challenge with grief is that I had a friend describe, how grief could actually be a burden, is that, there's a natural loss, but it's kind of like having a wound. If we cut ourselves deeply, that we hurt, and it's going to take some time to heal. But where we kind of dirty the wound or keep the grief going is like when it's almost like you rip the scab off and say, hey, am I healed yet? No, I'm not healed yet. And then you rip the scab off again, I'm still not healed. That's how we really stay in the state of grief a little too long. And I'm really good at doing that, I was. So the next level is fear. We all experience that. As a matter of fact, just before I came up here, I experienced it. Robert did a great job with the meditation. And right before I came up, there's all of a sudden this bout of this fear emerged. It's kind of like a bubble, So I'm going to talk about how we let that go. Desire, state of craving, that's addiction. When we covet something, that is the state of desire. We move up to anger and pride. These are powerful states of being. They're in the lower level, but hate and scorn, We see a lot of people who are very demanding and controlling and manipulative. You see that's a very powerful state, and I've learned the hard way that it's most of my life I was afraid of those people because I was living down here in fear, and they were up here, so I was afraid of being punished by them. So I naturally avoided them. So that's the bottom levels of consciousness. Now, as I said, these aren't bad. They just are. Our job now is to be aware of them, and at the end of our talk, we're going to talk about how we can let these go. Next slide, please, Lynn. The next states here, now we'll start at the bottom and go up to courage. Courage is the level of consciousness that we're in when we finally seek help for our challenge. When we go to God, or we go to the 12-step program, or we go to a counselor to help with the challenge that we're experiencing, that's the state. That's when change starts to happen. As you can see, that is us taking responsibility. It's admitting that we're powerless over this, but I need help. I can't do it on my own. And we move up into neutrality and willingness. Willingness is such a wonderful state because there's hope. There's hopefulness in the state of willingness. There's always a way to figure things out or to make way. God always has a way for us if we're only willing to surrender it. And then we move up into these more elaborate states, I'll call them. The state of reason. It's understanding. This is something where a gift comes after you do this spiritual work for a while, and you let go of these things that hold you back, and you get to see more clearly where people are at on the scale here, and you understand, as Bill said, they're doing the very best they can with what life they have. So there's no need to judge them or criticize them. You understand. And when you get to that point, you very quickly move into this state of love, where and when I say love, I don't mean the kind of love that you have in a companionship per se. This is a term like agape. It's not like I love white chocolate or something like that. I love white chocolate, but the feeling of love, the inner state of being of love, is a very powerful state of being where life really is an amazing experience. And so when you see life going on, you become very benign. You don't do things that are harmful to people. You become very considerate, and you do your very best to contribute to the harmony of life. As you move up on that, you get into states of joy and peace. And these states, maybe some of you live in this. Some of you have experienced this in spiritual experiences. A lot of times, if you have these unexpected spiritual experiences that come about, you tend to move into these places. Or if you use drugs or alcohol, you get to experience some of those states as well. As a matter of fact, that's what makes an addiction so challenging to overcome, is because you experience these states and you only know how to get to them through the use of drugs or alcohol. And the wonderful thing about a 12-step program is that it teaches you how to get there the right way. We don't take the kingdom of God by force, as they say in the Bible. And then ultimately, we move into this state of enlightenment. And so within Unity, we have all kinds of spiritual teachers that teach us all kinds of wonderful things. And it's one of the many, many things I love about Unity is because there's so many teachings that we respect and admire and pull value from, whether it's Eastern or Western or and so there's a lot of enlightened teachers that we have the privilege of being able to experiment with their ideas. As a matter of fact, Dr. Hawkins is considered one of them. So this is a tool. This is a wonderful opportunity. It's practical. It's a place where you can look within yourself and say, where is the opportunity within me to grow? Where can I peel that onion back more and more? And what's interesting, as I mentioned, when you looked at the whole scale, you're basically peeling those layers back until you get to this top place of enlightenment. Now, within each layer, there's all kinds of aversions and attractions, and so in Dr. Hawkins' book, Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, he goes into the details of how you let go. What are the typical attitudes and actions of that level of consciousness, and how do we disidentify with them? My experience, as I had with the fear, is this process of how do we let go? Today's topic is let go and let God. Well, how do we do that? First is we have to realize that we are not our thoughts. I think it was one of the biggest lessons I learned when I first came into Unity is that I thought I was my thoughts. I didn't realize that we had the ability to disidentify from it. Like, here's the thought, and now I can come back and observe the thought instead of being the thought. And if your thoughts are anything like mine, boy, they can really go crazy. They can really, these egoic thoughts are very condescending, condemning, fear-based. They're judgmental, and they're really destructive. Just like the lower states of consciousness are. Is the reason why we're in the lower states of consciousness is because we're identifying with those negative fear-based thoughts. But what happens is Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, is the first book that I read within Unity, and I learned that, actually, oh my gosh, seriously, we could disidentify from a thought, and we can actually watch it, and we don't have to attach ourselves to it, And so Dr. Hawkins, there's many different ways to surrender. Dr. Hawkins suggests one of them, and then I'll share a couple of others too. Dr. Hawkins he looks at, basically his position is that we have to surrender our attachment to that position, to the positionalities. We have to surrender what he calls the juice that we get out of that position. So for instance, if we were in the state of pridefulness, think of someone who's acting prideful. They're puffed up chest, look at me, I'm so wonderful, and they're very, I like to use the analogy of a stubborn goat or a stubborn mule. It's like you can't pull him where you want to go, and you can't push him because he just kind of locks in and stays there. So there's the idea of needing to be right. For instance, that is one of the prevailing attractions in that level of pride. So as you go through your day and you observe this tendency to identify with, I need to be right here, that is where you have an opportunity to surrender that. You can actually look at that and say, okay, there it is. Is that really to my advantage to continue to identify with this? Because ultimately, we know at some level this is really hurting us. Maybe our significant other or our coworkers or boss or somebody has said, man, yeah, you're really stubborn or whatever. And instead of being humble and experiencing some humility, we resist that. So we stop resisting. We allow the thought, the urge to come up. And just because there's an urge doesn't mean we have to gratify it. We can observe it, and we basically surrender that to God. And the surrendering process is pretty simple. It's just saying, that's not to my advantage. Or, Father, however you pray, God, I surrender this to you. It's the intention underneath your desire to let that go, which is where God works. Let go and let God. So the idea, if any of you have been in Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles is a program about surrendering. It's surrendering your position on all these different things in life. The 12-step program is yet another one. Dr. Hawkins has yet another one. There are many wonderful enlightened teachers that have programs to be able to shine the light of awareness on those areas within our psyche, our soul, if you will, that are dark, And if willing, if we really surrender that, then God does render those thoughts, attitudes, actions inoperative. And then by the nature, we automatically become the next better version, the next greater version of ourselves. And if you live your life in a constant state of surrender, as you're observing these thoughts and actions, these character defects, so as the 12-step program calls it, and surrender those, then it's like the burden gets lifted. One of the most powerful things of a 12-step program is doing a 4th-step, which is putting in your inventory of all the things that are really what we're talking about, these character defects that no longer serve us. And then there's this wonderful step where we surrender it all to God. And most people in the program experience a transformation of their psyche. Like Paul said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it puts you in places higher on this scale. And you become, out of the pure reverence and gratitude that you have for life, for God, for having removed that burden from you. And you just live a life of servitude. And it's amazing. Next slide, please. So, in the Bible, there's words that are used. In religion, there's words that are used that in my experience, some of these words were not, they were basically open demonstrations. It was an action that we took, but it never changed anything on the inner state of being, okay? So one of them is confession. So what we would say is confession is basically, as I observe that thought of fear, is I confess that to God. I accept what is. I am experiencing the fear. And I surrender it now. I don't try to change it. When that fear bubble kind of came up here, I'm like, I can't change. There's nothing I can do. I'm really powerless over this, you know? So my next step is to surrender it, to turn it over to God. The next is repentance. And repentance is to turn your back on it. It means to stop giving it your attention, to stop putting your attention in it. If I had got up there and said, Robert was finishing up his meditation, and I'm, oh my gosh, I'm in fear, oh my gosh. If I had, you know, gone down that path of worrying, and if I hadn't turned my back on it, then I could have come up here and been, you know, a mess. Maybe some of you think I'm a mess anyway. You're like, how do you get back up there? You know, Bill Leach must be stuffing the ballot box in his favor or something. And then the last part of this is the baptism. It's a washing away of that burden. So this surrender is the letting go and letting God. That's the key here, is God will render that or wash it or baptize you. Next slide, please. One of my beloved teachers' name is Dr. Robert Gibson, and he says we live in that which we radiate from within. So if you think about being on that scale somewhere, and your life is so fixated on what's wrong, and if you're on the lower end of that, and your attitudes and actions are so congruent with that, I want to read something from a book called Life's a Word. Now this book it's an anonymous author, but it's written from the perspective of God. So think about, as I read this, I think it really tells a very powerful statement, or if you will, about how we can take charge of our life experience. And by the way, it's written kind of in Old English. So there's some these and thous, okay? So unto thee have I given the power to radiate my love, my happiness, my health, my wealth, my vitality, and my wisdom. And as the sun cannot live in any light except that which it radiates or gives out, so it is impossible for thee to live in any light that thou dost not radiate. Thou canst not obtain love by getting it from without. Even as the sun cannot obtain light by getting it from without, all things are from inward outward. I have given them all unto thee to radiate from within thee. Happiness is constantly thine to the extent that thou dost give it out. Seeking happiness from without and drawing it to thyself is its own destruction. The desire to obtain happiness from without gives the sense of a lack of happiness. This sense is the only unhappiness. All things drawn toward thyself prove, when obtained, to be but a mirage in the desert. The anxiety to get for thyself from without proves always disappointing, because all realities radiate from within. Such a powerful, powerful statement. Now, here's the thing, is what God is saying is, you've already got it. You've got the love, you've got the vitality, you've got it all. You just have to find it within you. And what Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness does is it helps us see where we're at. And when we see where we're at, then we know what activity and action we can do to move, to eliminate, to surrender those, aversions and to God, so that we may radiate that brilliance and that light. So, if you have any interest in pursuing this concept any further, I think it's actually one of the most fascinating things about human consciousness. Feel free to come up to me after the talk today, or after service rather, and I'd be happy to share some additional information. Each of the levels of consciousness do have a list of behaviors, attitudes, actions to help us, kind of give us as a guide to where we can start working on releasing. We can do it through meditation, through lots of different things, so be happy to help here. But I love how Bill said there are no accidents in God's universe. I'll leave you with this, is I think one of the amazing things about Unity and whatever program we pursue to help us let go, to learn to let go of these things that hold us back, is that I've lived so much of my life, the majority of my life on the lower end of that scale there, that I really know what love is not now. And what's amazing about that is that experience gives me the ability to understand and to assist somebody else who's there without judgment. because they're not doing a single thing that I too haven't done. And there, but for the grace of God do I. But even better, or maybe equally as valuable, is that when you know what love is not, then when you learn what love really is, it makes it that much more incredible. Thank you very much. Let go and let God.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that really, really inspirational message. I found the book Power versus Force just before I found Unity, so this was a very important reminder to me today. It really was. Thank you, Greg. We are grateful for your prayers and your financial support. Every donation makes a difference in many lives. Because of your giving, we have a weekly homeless outreach, a supportive prayer chaplain ministry, inspirational Sunday services, and meaningful classes. And because of your giving, we have our spacious, peaceful, spiritual center. Thank you. Thank you. I knew something wasn't coming out right here. On our website, www.unitynorthtampa.org, you can click on the donate button or send checks to our mailing address, which is in the bulletin and on our website. If you are with us in person today, please put your donations in one of the offering baskets on the wall, in the sanctuary, or in fellowship. And again, thank you so much. Please join me in declaring our abundance affirmation. I am divine love and infinite abundance. All that I am, have, give, and receive multiplies and blesses me and the world. Now, prayer chaplain Linda Sletton will bless the offering.
We give thanks for all of the gifts that are received here in person and by mail and online. We dedicate all of these gifts for the highest spiritual good, and so it is. Amen.
Would our prayer chaplains who are on duty please stand? Our prayer chaplains are available to pray with you privately after the service. Everything shared with them is absolutely confidential. Our prayer chaplains who are on duty are wearing purple stole. And now for the announcements. Next Sunday, we have the pleasure of Terrence Young as our guest speaker. Yay! Sharing his message, A New Beginning. If sewing is one of your skills, we would like your help in repairing the tattered edge on our yellow Unity flag on Yarmesch. Please talk to Vicki Przinski if you can help. You'll see Vicki's photo on the Leadership Council insert in your bulletin. Please note in your bulletins we have our guest speaker evaluation for you to fill out. You may leave them in the basket in the foyer or in fellowship. You'll also see our July calendars inside your bulletin to help you stay up to date with our July activities. Now there's some additional announcements about July, about the July activities. The date of the drumming circle will change to July 25th, and also Reverend Elizabeth Thompson will be conducting a workshop on that same day. So those are a few additions. Pardon?
On the 11th.
Yeah. On the 11th. Well, I thought you said the same day. Sorry. Sorry. Last minute announcements that sometimes get a little garbled. Sorry. On the 11th of July. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Now it says here I'm supposed to make sure I have everybody's attention. May I have your attention, please? It's in big bold letters. Okay. Thank you. In your bulletins are the information update forms. Our faithful admin duo are working very hard to make sure the content database is up to date. So we are asking everyone, I repeat, everyone to fill out a form, even if your information has never changed. So for our friends watching online, there is a link to our weekly newsletter, to an online form that can you can securely fill out online. So you can do it whether you're here in person or you're home, and you can do that online. Finally, we have, and this is something that we added also, we still have some of those lovely paper flowers from Reverend Virginia's retirement celebration. And they're actually, we decided they're too fragile to keep and to store, but they're really too pretty to discard. So if you, on your way out today, if you would please take one of those pretty paper flowers, and they're on the counter that's in the homeless outreach area just before you get to fellowship. So please help yourself to one of those. And now Don Stevens, our Leadership Council President, has a transition update for us.
Thank you, Penny. I'll make this brief. The search team has our meeting, finally our meeting of training on Monday, where we're going to be hosted by Jessica Noble and Reverend Betty Martin Lewis. It's going to be instructional to help us to identify what specifically we need to look for in the applications, the abundant applications that are going to be coming in. Also, I want to let you know that our Leadership Council made a motion to accept our vision and mission statement. That vision statement is a spiritual home for all who seek peace. And our mission is we joyfully create peace in our hearts, our minds, and our world by living unity truth. Our next Leadership Council meeting is July 1st. And I also want to thank everybody we had a cleanup day yesterday. And I want to tell you what a great job that everybody that came here was such a great help. In fact, can you walk over to my house? Please. Oh, it was so amazing. And it was a lot of fun actually too. So I want to personally thank each and every one of you that showed up here yesterday. It was a lot of hard work. I have to admit it was sweat, blood, and tears, but I think if you take a look around, you'll see that there's quite an improvement here. And in fact, even moving all these chairs back in here too was quite a job too. So thank you for that cleaning committee or cleaning crew that came here. Okay, so yay!
Last but not least, the 50-50 prize drawing. Woo-hoo! Scoot the chair over there?
Yeah.
There's a ticket on the floor.
No.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
Not looking. Oh my gosh.
They're falling out.
They're leaking.
There's a lot of them in there.
We have a lot of tickets in that basket. We do. Donna, do you have the total amount?
I do.
Because it's a big one. We are very, very pleased that we thank you all so much for your participation, for buying tickets, and we have surpassed our goal that Donna and I set.
Yeah.
So we're very excited about that. So.
Okay, the total amount collected was $2,215. Yeah. So the lucky winner is going to receive $1,107.50. How about that? Yes. Thank you all who participated in this. It really goes and helps tremendously to Unity North Tampa, so we really appreciate that. Okay, so drum roll. No, I'm just kidding. Oh no, I'm sorry. Audrey's going to be pulling our ticket for us too. We did it, I know, but she's going to. Don't worry, I got it. Okay, take a spin on that. You can keep going. Okay, there you go. All right. So what I want you to do is to reach your hand there, and I want you to look that way when you do it.
All right, that's going to be hard. There you go.
red ticket number 778602. Okay, so I'm gonna look at my sheet. Anybody here know that number? Okay, 778602. 77860. There she, Shirley Brown. You're going to be getting a check for $1,107.50.
Thank you so much. Part of that will come back to Unity. I never really kind of won anything, so I guess it was my time. Yeah. And thank you all, for supporting Unity, because this is what we are all about. I was so excited about the drawing, I forgot we have to finish the service here. I was ready to party. Okay, but this is such a good part of the service too. We invite you to stand for the peace song. So let's say these affirmations from our hearts, knowing that we are spiritually empowered to move successfully through this time of transition. The light of God surrounds us. We are light. The love of God enfolds us. We are love. The power of God protects us. We are power. The presence of God watches over us. We are presence.